I, 20 female, have been a jerk to my dad, 53 male, ever since the divorce, and I just found out that he is the victim all along. Before my mom became my stepdad's partner, she was married to my dad for 9 years. He was a soldier, and his best buddy, who is now my stepdad, was this wealthy guy I often saw with my mom back then. During their split, my mom said my dad was abusive, controlling, and emotionally distant, which is why she left him. She claimed he treated her poorly, called her names, and didn't care for her. I was just 10 years old then. Mom got custody of me, and Dad had to pay child support. I only got to spend 2 weekends a month with him. I grew resentful towards my dad after that. I dreaded our visits. He sold our old house, moved back to his hometown, opened a mechanic shop, and lived there. He battled alcoholism and tried to clean up his act whenever I visited. But he was always gloomy, isolated, and down. Even though he tried to tidy up, his place still reeked of alcohol, gunpowder, gasoline, and car oils. Sometimes I'd find piles of dirty laundry in the laundry room. As I got older, I started avoiding him more. I made excuses to skip our visits and only dropped by a few times a year. One day, I decided to surprise him with a visit. When I arrived, I caught him drinking while watching football. He hurriedly hid his beer cans, cleaned his kitchen, and offered to order pizza. That's when I lost my temper. I blamed him for Mom leaving, saying he couldn't get his act together. I felt guilty afterward. Despite our rocky relationship, Dad had a soft spot for classic muscle cars. When I turned 18, he gifted me a 1970 Chevy, which he had lovingly restored himself. Later, Mom and I sold it and bought a Honda Civic, so last week I went to visit my mom, planning to stay for the weekend. On Saturday night, I overheard my mom and stepdad chatting about what happened 12 years ago, boasting about their affair, and not once showing any regret for how it affected my dad. All they could muster up was a little sympathy for him. It made me cry uncontrollably. I wanted to confront her, to call her names, but I just didn't have the strength. I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions, but guilt weighed heaviest on my heart. All this time, I held on to resentment towards my dad, thinking he was the bad guy. But really, he was just a victim of my mom's affair. He never fully recovered from it, battling depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Despite his struggles, he genuinely cared for me. He always tried to stay strong and put on a brave face for my sake. The next day, I left my mom's place and headed straight to my dad's mechanic shop. I hugged him tightly, tears streaming down my face. He looked puzzled, but I just kept saying sorry over and over again. After I calmed down a bit, I poured my heart out to him, apologizing even more. I asked him why he didn't fight for custody of me. He explained that he knew his mental health issues, depression, anxiety, and PTSD would make him an unfit parent. He didn't want to ruin the relationship between me and my mom because he knew I loved her, and he believed his ex-best friend, my stepdad, would take care of me better than he could. He assured me it wasn't my fault, forgave me, and expressed his happiness that I finally found out the truth. Update 1. As they say, there are always 2 sides to every story, so I decided to hear my dad's side out. He admitted to being distant and less affectionate after his last deployment because of his PTSD. However, he made it clear that the affair had already started while he was deployed. A few days after my post, I confronted my mom about everything. She got defensive at first, saying I wasn't appreciative of what she did for me. She claimed she was just protecting me from my dad, and even called him a few names. I didn't want to argue, so I chose my words carefully. I told her that my dad was a good man who was shattered by the betrayal of the 2 people he trusted the most. I also pointed out how she turned her own daughter against him. I thanked her for everything, but I made it clear that I was choosing to stand by the parent who always prioritized his daughter's needs, even if it meant making difficult sacrifices. I said goodbye to my mom, promising to keep in touch. Tears welled up in her eyes as I left, and she remained silent. She's tried to reach out to me since then, but I've been ignoring her or politely asking her to stop bothering me. I haven't blocked her, but my message is crystal clear. Recently, my aunt reached out to me and shared that my mom is struggling with depression. Well, her husband can take care of her from now on. Regarding my dad, many of my friends suggested I sell the Civic and buy back the Chevy. Unfortunately, I couldn't track down the person I sold it to. Instead, I decided to search for old, beaten-up muscle cars to restore. It was tough, but with the help of a few friends, I finally struck gold almost 2 weeks ago when I found a wrecked 1970 Dodge Charger. Yep, I sold the Civic to afford the Charger. My dad was a bit disappointed at first, but when I explained why, his face lit up. He's been more than happy to teach me how to fix it. I even bought an apartment an hour away from his mechanic shop. One of my friends suggested we give his place a makeover, so I've been making time for that. We've started renovating and giving it a fresh look. Some friends from college who are studying interior design have jumped in to help. It took a bit of persuading as he felt embarrassed, but he eventually got on board. Now I visit him every day after college, and on weekends we spend time together, chatting about anything and everything, mostly his interests. He's a big soccer fan, especially of Arsenal, so I keep him company during match days, picking the opposing team for fun and learning a bit about football. Since I sold my car, he's let me use his 1977 Pontiac Firebird, which he's had since I was 11. He's never let anyone else drive it until now. Since I've been around more often, he's cut back on his drinking habits, though we might indulge a bit on game nights. But who can blame us? So, there you have it. I still harbor resentment towards my mom for all the missed opportunities I could have had with my dad, but as he said, it's never too late to reconnect.